Hi everyone, Sajid, Amit here, and welcome to a review of the Stax SR-X9000, which is the latest flagship from Stax, the very famous and I dare say legendary company that manufactures e-stats. So Stax is almost synonymous with electrostatic headphones, and a lot of electrostatic headphone owners will, live and die by Stax, only own Stax often, spend a ton of money tweaking the chain, finding the right DAC to pair with the Stax. And a lot of ESAT owners will commission DIY amp builds. And it's sort of a subset within the hobby. And it's very exciting for me to audition the X9000 because this headphone has not reached the hands of many people who have ordered it, let alone reviewers. So I'm very excited. I'm in Bangkok at Mangkong Gadget, and Stax was kind enough to send it to me. Mangkong is a dealer of Stax, so I'm in Bangkok for medical reasons and just to hang out because I like Bangkok. So Stax sent this in to coincide with my trip, so I can just give my impressions on it. And I'll leave a link to a written review once I get around to writing my thoughts up. But for now, I just want to talk about how this fares, and I'll draw comparisons to the latest Audeze e-stat, which I think a lot of people are wondering about in terms of how they compare. This is the Audeze CRBN. It's a stunning looking headphone, and yeah, it's also great sounding. So I'll talk about this, and I'll also compare the Stax SR-X9000 with the older flagship from Stax, which I have incidentally owned and I've reviewed on this channel. So feel free to check out the review of the SR-009S. I've talked about this in several videos of mine on this channel. So I think it makes sense to draw comparisons of the X9000 with the 009S, which I will. And yeah, I also think I should start by talking about the chain. So the chain on which I've driven all these headphones has the Mytek Manhattan 2, which is a lovely DAC. To my mind, or to my ears, it sounds largely neutral. It's very detailed and has good staging and imaging. And for amplification, I've used the Wu Audio West, which, if you see my previous video, I'm a big fan of. And I like Wu Audio amps in general. The West is wonderful. It's super powerful. It brings out the bass in e-stats, I think. So it doesn't, it won't make an e-stat into a bass monster, because that is not the purpose of an e-stat, I think. But it does bring out the bass of e-stats. It's warm sounding, but not overly warm or overly lush. It's by and large neutral-ish to warm. So with that out of the way, let's talk about aesthetics, build, and comfort. Starting with aesthetics, this is a very pretty looking headphone. I think the color schematic works really well. It's got this sort of metallic, sort of gray thing going on with brownish, ear pads, a brownish sort of strap. This is very comfortable. It feels great. Overall, these headphones feel very comfortable. It's sort of, the clamp is noticeable in its absence. There's no clamp, and I really like the fact that there's no clamp. And yeah, they look very cool. The gold stators look very cool. I think what's noticeable also is the fact that this is more comfortable, I think, than the 009S, which also was comfortable, but this has had a way of sort of, you'd feel the weight on your head after a while. And the build quality of the 009S is really not close to the build quality of the X9000. This is far better built. And the Audeze CRBN, of course, is supremely well built. And I think, in my mind, it is perhaps the best built e-stat that I've ever had the pleasure of holding in my hands. It's also the most attractive in my eyes. I think it's wonderful to look at. And but then in terms of comfort, I think this is not as comfortable as the X9000 is. This is by far the most comfortable e-stat I've had the pleasure of wearing. This is a bit clampy. So the ear cups are large and oval shaped, which is nice. But I think it's still very clampy. And I'm not a big fan of the Audeze yoke system. They did something similar with the LCD5, which I reviewed. And the LCD5 I thought was not comfortable at all, and over long-term usage I've decided to sell it, and I did sell it, as a matter of fact. This is slightly more comfortable. It's a lot more comfortable than the LCD5. I don't think you're going to sell it because of lack of comfort, but it is clampy, and it's not as comfortable as the X9000s. So that's aesthetics, build, and comfort. Now, in terms of tonality, first and foremost, I think what Stax might have tried to do with this, and I'll tell you if this works or not for me. I think they've tried to sort of find a middle ground between the between the 007 Mark 1, Mark 2s, which are more warmly tuned, will have a more warmer tuning. And they're trying to find a middle ground between that warmer tuning and the brighter tuning of the 009S. Have they succeeded? Yes, I think they have succeeded. So this is a warmer headphone compared to the 009S. The treble is present, but it's never bright. The other thing that I think aids to the sense of warmth is the fact that the way the stage is that it's somewhat distant from you, right? It's a sort of effect I think the Holo Audio Maydag has on a lot of speakers and headphones. So this is a more relaxed, more laid-back presentation. Now I just want to say that it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, because this, coming from the 009S, which is like a wild tiger, this is a very tamed tiger, almost like a declawed tiger, because this has euphony, this has speed, this has a lot of energy. It has a very forward presentation, and they fixed some of the problems the 009 had with this. I've auditioned and I've tried both the 009 and 009S. I think the 009S is a superior headphone to the 009 for sure. In my, this is my subjective take, of course. So this has this sort of E-stat forwardness, and a lot of people didn't like it, of course. And if you didn't like the brightness of the 009 or the 009S, if you hated it, let's say, you would love this. But if you like the sort of tonality and signature of this, I don't know, I feel like you need to audition this first, because it is very relaxed. For the sake of another reference, it's more relaxed than the Susvaras. Now, I know that this tonality comes off as more refined, and it is, because I think on with many manufacturers, the higher end products you buy, they do have a tendency of sounding more and more relaxed. For example, if you see my previous review where I talked about the DCS Rossini and the DCS Vivaldi is definitely more relaxed than the Rossini. A lot of MSB DACs are very relaxed. So it really depends, right? I mean, if you're very treble sensitive, you might like this, the tonality of this before. I do want to mention that the bass impact is certainly more palpable on this than on the 009S. It's just, I think, a more lifelike bass. So the 009S still has amazing bass control, bass speed, bass texture, bass detail. This takes it up a notch in terms of bass detail, and it's perceptible. The speed is not comparable, of course, but this has more impact. So that might matter to you if you're looking for overall warmer tuning with more bass. So that definitely does it. It doesn't have the bass level or the impact level of the carbons, though, because the carbons have, and some people have pointed this out, and rightly so, I think, this has impressive levels of impact, at least on the chain on which I've tried. Like I said, the chain on which I've tried this is the Mytek Manhattan 2 and, of course, the Wu Audio West. So on that chain, this has impressive levels of impact, guys. And I think a lot of people who are trying E-stats for the first time and are afraid of getting into a bass shy or bass light sort of, a headphone, you would be better off trying this, because this has very impressive levels of impact for an E-stat. However, this doesn't have the sort of, the airiness with which I think a lot of people associate E-stats. It doesn't really sound like an E-stat in that sense. The mid-range on this is fine. And if I have to talk about the mid-range on all these three headphones, for my personal preferences, I prefer the mid-range of the 009 or the 009S. It's very Susvara-like, and it's very euphonic, a lot of micro detail. It's very forward. So people who like mid-range will like this. It really allows you to sort of focus on the mid-range, the 009S. So the X9 kit doesn't have an inferior mid-range to the 009S, but it's just several rows back. So it doesn't really let you engage with the mid-range as much, which is fine, I think, for a lot of people, because it's still a very, very well done mid-range. It's very natural sounding, but yeah. So overall, that's sort of my take on the tuning. Warmer, doesn't have the sort of forward presentation in upper mid-range and treble that this does. This is brighter, has a more forward mid-range. This has a better bass in terms of impact and also detail. This has weaker bass, that has to be said. You don't buy a 009S because you want bass. This is a headphone that you can actually, an E-stat that you can actually buy and not be disappointed with the bass impact, honestly. And for the sake of reference, I own an Abyss, a TC. I've heard an LCD4 and a lot of other bassy headphones, and I still think this has good bass impact. But this misses the sort of, treble energy, especially the air frequencies that I think a lot of people associate with these stats. So that's it for tuning, guys. Whether you like this or not will come down to how much you value a relaxed, spacious sort of presentation that's warm, and how much you crave that sort of spaciousness and openness and depth, which is a nice segue into talking about the technical performance section for these headphones. Technically, I do think this is the most superior headphone on this table. It's more detailed. Now, is it a lot more detailed than the 009S? No, it's not a lot more detailed. It's slightly more detailed, but it's a lot more spacious. This has a very interesting take on stage. It's really, really large, and some people have said that this is second only to the SR-1A, and I think I agree with that perception. Not so much because of stage depth. I've not heard a single Stax that does stage depth. I'm sorry, width. So depth on this is phenomenal. The depth on this is sort of like number 2, I think, among all headphones I've heard. Number 1 being the SR-1A from RAL Requisite. But in terms of width, guys, it's not as wide as, let's say, even an HD800S is, which is still the king of width, I think, perhaps just a notch below the SR-1A. This has great, great depth, but the width is, the width is fine. It's slightly wider than the 009S. But honestly, guys, if you crave soundstage depth, if you are coming from speakers and you love having sound come from behind speakers, this does replicate that somewhat. And I honestly think that a lot of more seasoned, or maybe more seasoned is not the right expression, maybe older 2-channel audiophiles who like a very deep stage, like a lot of 2-channel audiophiles I know, will really like this. It's very relaxed. Timbrely, it somehow has less of an E-stat plasticness than this does. It sounds more natural to my ears, so I do think this has better timbre. And in terms of speed and dynamics, this I wouldn't say that this is slower or faster than the 009S, but I do think the 009S somehow can convey the impression of more speed because of its treble tuning, because of its sort of slight lack of bass energy and bass impact. This can sound more fleet-footed and more quicker, but this, I think, honestly, is probably equal in terms of speed. It is slightly more dynamic in terms of macrodynamic energy. And imaging-wise, yeah, I mean, this is a bigger stage, and this does give you the impression of a little more spread-out imaging presentation and more spread-out images, and very precise, as precise as the 009S, perhaps slightly more precise. Technically, yes. So technically, it is, I think, objectively, to my mind, slightly superior to the 009S, and perhaps noticeably superior to the Carbon, because the Carbon is not as technical as the 009S or the X9000s. The Carbon does what it does really, really, really well, and I think this should get a separate review, and it will. But overall, guys, this is a very interesting headphone from Stax. So Stax took its time in coming out with this flagship. And there was a lot of hoopla and hype around it, and now that people are not getting it in their hands because it's taking forever for Stax to put these headphones together and ship. Not a fault of Stax. The pandemic affected supply chains, and parts have become expensive. This is the box that X9000 comes with. It is fancy, it is premium, and is undoubtedly the most premium looking and feeling experience that Stax will give you. If you're a Stax aficionado, I can't see you going wrong with this, because a lot of Stax aficionados are collectors, and if you want to collect the most high-end headphone, the highest end headphone, I'm sorry, I didn't sleep much last night, as might be evident. But anyway, if you want to collect the highest end headphone from Stax, this is it. This does sound high-end. It's got this wonderfully detailed, lucid, liquid, large presentation with good bass impact. But is it a definitive upgrade from the 009S? In some ways it is, but not in every sense. I still think that for lovers of the 009S sound, that raw euphony and mid-range energy and liquid presentation with extreme micro nuances and microdynamics that is in your face, people who love this sound and have worked on developing a chain for this with a warm DAC and a warm amp and all that, you might want to audition the X9000 first, because the X9000 might not be the best headphone if you have invested in a chain for this. You might need a different chain for this, honestly, because I'm a very chain picky person, so take it take what I'm saying with that sort of caveat. But it is in some ways a superior headphone. And for the others who want to own everything or can own more than one headphone, it makes sense to own both because they have different flavors, very distinct flavors. This is spacious and warm. This is bright and in your face. Not bright in the absolute sense, honestly. I think it's the sort of brightness that's nice. It's the sort of sparkliness that I think a lot of audiophiles love and enjoy. This is a legendary headphone, honestly, and a lot of people love this headphone, so that's worth keeping in mind. A special mention to the Audeze CRBN because I think Audeze has really impressed with this headphone. First of all, with the looks of this, it is so stunning that I think you need to see this in real life to understand how good this looks. Slightly clampy, but much better than the LCD5, which I've owned and sold. And a very nice tuning. Perhaps the best tuned headphone I've heard, other than the Shangri-La Junior, which should also get its review if I can get around to it. So that's it, guys. High praise. I recommend this headphone. But I do want to give you the disclaimer that this might not be for everyone. If you don't like an overly laid-back presentation, you want to audition this first. If you love a laid-back presentation with massive stage, you like this. For people who are beholden to the 009 and 009S sound, audition first. Thank you, guys. I hope this was useful. Stax sent this to me for review, so a big shout out to Stax. They're wonderful to deal with. A company with a lot of legacy, a rich history. I have really enjoyed listening to Stax headphones. So very grateful to Stax for sending this to me for review, but I've tried my best to be honest and objective because I think that's important for those of you watching, because what I try to do here is share my love for audio, and I try to help those of you who might be, looking to buy these headphones based on my recommendation. So that's it. I'm signing out from Mangkong Gadget in Bangkok. I hope this was useful. Give it a like if you like it and subscribe to my channel if you have not already. Thank you. Bye-bye.